Thank you, everyone. So I'm from a company called Jemena. At Jemena, we're an energy infrastructure business, and we deliver both gas and electricity to millions of customers every single day. Now, operating across both the gas and the electricity space, it gives us a really unique perspective of what customers really need to decarbonise through this energy transition. We've heard earlier on today, we've talked about the hard-to-abate sector. So I think it's reasonably well known and recognised now that there's a lot of industry that can't decarbonise through electrification. We know that in our gas distribution network in New South Wales, 70% of our industrial customers really need that gaseous molecule either for really high heat, they need that combustion for degrees over sort of 1,000, 1,500 degrees for the operations of their business, or they need that gaseous molecule as feedstock to the creation of their product, be it fertiliser, the creation of chemicals, explosives. So I think that's a well-known, well-recognised customer base that we know still will continue to need a gaseous molecule and need it in a green renewable form. We're also hearing from quite a number of our customers though that whilst they can electrify a large part of their operations, there's that section of it that can't be electrified, and they are looking for another solution. So be that hospitals are still needing gas for sterilisation. We currently in discussions with some beverage businesses where they are still needing, there's still an element of high heat, in their processing. We're also interestingly hearing from businesses that operate outside of the 9 to 5. There's a number of manufacturing businesses that will operate overnight, but even bakeries that are baking early in the morning before the sun rises. Those that are electrifying are finding that they're electrifying into peak electricity prices and their costs are going through the roof. And the same's happening at the other end of the day with restaurants. So we are increasingly getting customers coming to us saying, we need a decarbonisation solution for our gas. What we're planning to do to help all these customers decarbonise, in our gas distribution network in New South Wales, we are planning to transition that natural gas over to being 100% renewable gas by 2050. What that will look like is over time, that sort of, the amount of natural gas that's in there will be slowly replaced by a mixture of biomethane, synthetic methane, and a bit of hydrogen blending. And the beauty of this solution and the benefit and the value of this is it is 100% compatible with existing infrastructure and existing end-use appliances. So it's actually, chemically identical to natural gas. So we don't need large upgrades of our infrastructure, and the end users don't need to be changing out their appliances. So hopefully it is a low-cost approach and a low-cost solution to be able to decarbonise gas usage. I know some of the questions, and I think part of the thing I'm wanting to do today is dispel some of the questions that we get when we speak to stakeholders. So, one of the first questions we hear is, but hold on, if it's chemically the same and it's biomethane and it's still methane, how's it green? How is it reducing emissions? I'm seeing some nods in the audience. It's an obvious question, isn't it? Well, so let me explain this in terms of carbon dioxide, because when you burn methane, it turns to carbon dioxide. There is a certain amount of carbon dioxide that we actually need in the ecosystem. So we know that plants actually absorb carbon dioxide and they need it for photosynthesis. So generally what happens is plants and animals consume a certain amount of carbon dioxide during their lifetime, and when they die and start decomposing, they re-release that carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. So that's part of this sort of natural carbon cycle. And what we're proposing to do is to take that biomethane that's rotting from, be it landfill, we need to have a chat, landfill, wastewater, crops, agricultural crops. There's a lot of opportunity out there, and so we take that, we clean it up, we inject it into the network, and we displace natural gas. So natural gas also comes from decomposing organic matter, but we're digging up out of the ground where it's been locked up for millions of years. So that is actually adding emissions into the environment. So that's the difference between the two. And the International Panel on Climate Change, Australia's Clean Energy Regulator both recognise biomethane as being carbon neutral because it is part of that natural carbon cycle. So we're not adding anymore. So hopefully that helps everyone understand why it is. It's green, it's renewable, and it is low carbon. Now, this might seem like a great idea, but how do we know it's going to work? Is this just some harebrained scheme that we have made up? I can tell you these markets are actually huge over in the US and the UK. In Europe, well, I think it was spurred on by the Russian war, invading Ukraine. Europe, I think about 30% of Europe's gas supply came out of Russia, and they needed to find a way to wean themselves off that Russian gas. So they started putting policies in place. There were some biomethane plants over there, but the market has just exploded. There are now over 1,500 biomethane plants. Over 90% of them are already injecting into the natural gas network in Europe. Denmark has about 40% of their gas network is currently biomethane, and they plan to be 100% by 2030. Ireland have announced this year that they plan on being 100% in their gas network by 2045. We've seen a 30% increase in France over the last couple of years, and there's $27 billion, earmarked for investment between now and 2030 to really incentivise and drive that biomethane market across Europe, particularly across Poland, Italy and Denmark. So we're seeing it's huge in Europe, and it's the same in the US. Only about 4 years ago, there were about 160 biomethane plants. There's now over 500. So we're seeing overseas that it works, and it works well. And it is supported by government policy. Vikram talked about the policy that is required to start early markets and help them get off the ground. So then the question becomes, okay, well, we see it overseas, how do we know that it's viable here? Well, we know that it's viable here, firstly because we have actually built one of these things. We have partnered with Sydney Water. We're capturing the gas that comes off the wastewater treatment plant, we're cleaning it up and we're injecting it into the network. So we've proven that it works here. We know that there are a couple of really big questions that we get about the viability of this in Australia. The first question, and I think we heard it a little earlier on, was, is there enough supply? Do we believe there's enough supply? Now this is where the slides might have come in handy, only so you could eyeball the numbers. But Bioenergy Australia did some research with ARENA back in about 2020, and they identified in the order of magnitude of about 1,100 to 2,000 petajoules of available biomass across the nation. We know that current usage is about 1,500 petajoules. So there's more than enough. But there's potentially competition for this feedstock. So I can tell you in New South Wales, there's about 425 petajoules of available feedstock in New South Wales. We only need about 49 of that for our industrial customers, and we currently have MOUs for about 54 petajoules, which is more than enough to cover those customers, which means there's 373 petajoules available for SAF or other e-fuels. At the point of injection into a distribution network, biomethane is reasonably comparable to natural gas in price, and is expected to come down over time with technology improvements in supply chain, and also the byproduct market, being able to sell those byproducts such as biogenic CO2 and digestate. So we believe there's a viable market, and we're expecting it to start 1st of July next year is the expectation, with some policy support that we expect to be coming through. So hopefully we can help all of your businesses decarbonise too.